my testimony. Nobody can't tell it like I can tell it. I went back to Sex and Homes, which is not there any longer. 5-3 Sex and Homes is where I had a lot of my first experiences. A lot of people may have thought that I was too young to remember the things that happened. And a lot of it, I believe God had blocked out of my memory for this such a time. So when my book came out, or when my movie come out, people will understand. I drove by there and so many things started coming back to me. And that's why it's been so hard to be in Columbia, South Carolina, because a lot of my childhood memories are starting to come back and reveal itself. And I'm like, dog, I'm writing down into so much stuff that God has given me. And I want to use it, not abuse the lesson and the testimony that God has given me by trying to be nasty and do a get back and a clap back at other folk. So if you hating, you can go on to another channel. But in 5-3 Sex and Homes, that's when I first learned about sex. That's when I first learned about my house getting shot up. That's when I first learned about drugs. That's when I first learned about death. I think I saw my first dead body in Sex and Homes. People tend to forget that the child is standing right beside you while they were cuddling the adult and saying, Sharon, it's okay. You the baby. You the baby. But the child was right there standing by the mama looking at the dead body on the stairs. People tend to forget those kind of things. People tend to forget how a lot of things were swept under the rug, as I touched on in my first video of being an addict, a addict's child. A lot of people swept under the rug me getting sexually molested as a child. My grandma knew, my mama knew, but they swept it under the rug and sent my mama to a rehab. I remember living in 5-3 Sex and Homes. And in this time frame, my mom had helped with all my other cousins and stuff and helped raise them. I remember my cousins where my aunt worked a lot and she helped raise their kids. And, just my mom was there. And I think she had raised so many other people's kids. She was tired by the time she got to me. And I think I was one of those tactics of, she thought I was going to keep my daddy. But her not knowing that my daddy wasn't addicted to women, he was addicted to drugs. She knew a piece of it, but she didn't know the whole story. And so no baby wasn't going to keep him. And when she found out that wasn't going to work, I think she went on over to the other side for a little while. And I remember telling my mom, first off, in Sex and Homes, how the apartments were made. It was kind of like a sidewalk that goes down. One side was apartments on this side, and across the way was apartments on the other side, right? And in front of us, we used to have a lady named Miss Vernell. I used to love Miss Vernell. I don't know, it was something about her spirit. I was a little girl, but she'd be out there, they'd be drinking and playing their music, and she'd be out there, teared up paper. I don't know what that means, but she used to always say it. And beside her was Miss Pat. And Miss Pat had, I'm going to use nicknames so nobody won't get offended, but it's the truth. I don't know the little girl's nickname, but her name was Ashley, and her brothers were AJ and Bobo. And I remember my mom, they used to take turns watching each other kids. And my mom would go out and she would leave me with Miss Pat. But Miss Pat would drink a lot, and she would get busted. The house would burn down around her. She would not wake up. And because me and Ashley used to pee in the bed, what she did was she called herself protecting us and putting us in the room with her. And she would make pallets on the floor. And when I was little, her sons would come in and they would mess with me. And I remember I got bold enough and I told my mom. And my mama, she questioned me up and down, in and out, through and through, what it looked like, what they did, what it looked like, what it felt like. And she brushed it off as if it never happened. So I remember telling my grandmother, and my grandmother, she got us. I remember her getting us, and my mom went back to rehab once again, and they swept it under the rug. And when mama came back, she had her kids back again, And so what I learned from that trauma was, although you go through things in life, you do better from what the generation before you did. And what I mean by that is, now that I have kids, I love harder. I protect more. I listen to my kids more. I watch mannerisms and how they act, how they look, facial expressions. I learned that it's not something that I did to cause these things to happen to me. I didn't do. It's nothing that I did, And a lot of times, kids, when they're in situations like that, they feel like if they try harder or be better kids or do something differently, the result of the way things turned out, the outcome would be different. And it's something that was said to my daughter by my mom in reference to me having sex at an early age. And the truth of the matter is, I never had sexual consent, like real sexual consent, because I always felt dirty. I always felt nasty because of what I had experienced. Hell, at one time, I didn't even know whether I was going to like boys or girls, because I didn't have a sexual desire to want anybody. My high school, well, not really high school sweetheart, we kind of went to church together or whatever. And my first real boyfriend, he was there, but I was still trying to find myself, honestly. And it was said to my daughter that I had sex at an early age. And I tried to fathom or figure out why somebody would say something like that. And I had to explain to my daughter, you're exactly right. It was not because I wanted to. It was because an irresponsible adult left me somewhere that I wasn't supposed to be. And the hard pill to swallow is the reality that people tend to forget. You become a liar in their books when you tell the truth. But what you have to remember is, when healing loudly and boldly, if you ain't got somebody hating, if you ain't got somebody talking about what you talking about, if you ain't got nobody commenting, then you ain't reaching nobody. The goal is to reach somebody, to let somebody know that I care. I've been there. I know what it feels like to feel like you're in a world all by yourself. No mama, no daddy. So